we're going to look at some of the rules and conventions around JavaScript function naming, and then look at a really cool example that you might recognize of a function with a distinct name. So function names can begin with a $, an underscore, or a letter, but not a digit, just like variable names. They can contain letters or numbers, or some punctuation. Punctuation marks like the hyphen, the plus sign, the slash, anything that's an operator in the JavaScript language cannot be used in a function name. Now, Unicode characters are technically allowed. Unicode is the extended character set that supports many of the different alphabets used in languages around the world. You can use those in function names, but it's not common. Generally, you stick to the standard ASCII character set, and that allows your code to be more easily readable and maintainable by others. And it's typical to camel case your function names. Camel case is actually what you see here on this slide. It is using a lowercase letter to begin every function name, and then where you have a word boundary where you would normally have white space if this was a sentence, instead you use a capital letter. And that creates the camel case that's common in variable names and function names in JavaScript. So what we're going to do next is just build an example of a really cool function that mimics something that you might be familiar with. And that looks like this. If you've been using JavaScript at all, you've probably come across the JQuery library, and JQuery has syntax that looks like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a small function that mimics this part of what JQuery does, so you can see what's happening under the hood. So the kind of function call that we're going to make is going to look something like this. I'm calling a function with a $, and I'm passing it an ID. And you can see in my HTML that I actually have a list item element with the ID of first list item. So this is the thing I'm trying to retrieve from my page with that call. And so in framing out this function, it basically, pardon my clock, in framing out this function, it basically looks like this. I have a function with the name $, perfectly valid name in JavaScript, and I'm passing it an ID. I'm expecting this to be a string. And now that that's framed out, what we're going to do is include, we're going to check to see that the ID actually exists, and if so, we're just going to call document get element by ID and return whatever it is that we get. So here I have my first list item call. If we want to make this work, we should do something with it. So I am going to simply call log message and have it appear here in this window. And here it is. I have my HTML element, string representation of my HTML element object. Now that's not quite exactly what I was expecting. But nonetheless, at least it shows us that our code is correctly retrieving something. Now, because I can chain function calls, this function should return an HTML element. And if I want the contents of that HTML element, I'm going to use the inner HTML property. And now I actually see that my output is the inner HTML of this HTML element. Now, this is not particularly robust code. By chaining this on here without checking first, I'm assuming that I'm going to get an HTML element back from my code. If I were to change this ID so that it doesn't return anything, doesn't match anything in the page, you can see I threw an error. So a more responsible piece of code, and the kinds of things that jQuery does for you very well, is it makes sure that what you get back is at the very least not going to throw an error. But this shows you in a very simple way how some of the functionality of jQuery works, and how it can be mimicked very simply, and how actually you in your own code can use that $sign too if you want to. In fact, in this case, my log message function that's here uses document.getElement by ID. I could actually replace that with a call to the function we just wrote. And if I run this, the output is the same. So that $sign in jQuery is really just a clever use of function naming to create something that's short and easy to type and easy to remember. And you can see we can recreate some of that functionality very simply with just a few lines of code. Now, when we get to Unit 4 of this course, we're going to dive into jQuery, and you're going to see all the rest of what jQuery provides, which includes a lot of the error checking and things that prevent the kinds of errors that I just created a moment ago in this code. But at its core, what's happening is very simple. And you can do it too.